Hello and welcome to PeopleGoal's weekly webcast where we discuss the latest HR topics to help you thrive. My name is Maddie O'Neill. I'm an HR growth analyst here at PeopleGoal, and I'm also joined here with Chrissa.
Hello, Maddie. Thank you for having me here. I'm Chrissa. I'm an HR consultant working for high-tech companies, and I would like to see and discuss today's topic with you.
Right, let's get started. So our topic for today, just to give it a little bit of context. So the transition to remote work has transformed performance management, and for some organisations this has meant abandoning performance reviews altogether. However, performance management remains crucial to development, and that leads us to ask, how should we kick off remote performance reviews for 2020? So the structure of this webcast, we will start off with a brief introduction to performance reviews, and then Chrissa will take over to give us some best practices. And we will finish off with how to kick off remote performance reviews for your organisation and finish up with some key takeaways. Introduction to performance reviews. They are a process of ensuring that a set of activities and outputs meet the company's objectives. And it is a talent engagement process which provides direction and increases accountability whilst meeting objectives. So performance reviews are, on the one hand, all about ensuring that both individual and company goals are achieved. However, what we are beginning to realise is that fixed patterns and a one-size-fits-all mentality in regard to performance reviews actually is inhibiting performance and can be quite detrimental to employee growth. So there is an increasing demand for flexibility and agility in regard to the process. Performance reviews are really important for both office and remote workers. However, they do have a few elements which provide different benefits. So in terms of the office performance review, one of the key benefits was it was an opportunity to have a face-to-face catch-up with between the manager and employee. Obviously, since shifting to remote work, that is something that we have lost, but it's still really important to keep those performance reviews in place to close communication gaps, which are undoubtedly happening due to everybody working isolated in a remote environment. Another key advantage for remote teams, which perhaps wasn't so necessary for office teams, is the sense of normalcy provided by performance reviews. A lot is changing in the moment, and a lot of people have had a lot of change in their work and personal lives. And having those recurring processes can be quite comforting and provide that sense of normalcy for the remote employee. So moving on to what is important for both remote and office employees, performance reviews are an opportunity to measure employee achievement, both celebrating accomplishments and providing and receiving meaningful feedback. They also provide a space to voice any concerns that an employee may have had, especially at the moment. Things are very new for a lot of us, and it is really important to have that space that we can raise concerns if we need to with our managers. Finally, they're an opportunity to discuss compensation, promotion, and employee development, and this is really important for both office and remote workers. So moving on to sort of more company-wide benefits, they're a real opportunity to strengthen company culture and reinforce company values in this process, as well as creating alignment throughout the organisation, especially for those remote teams which are losing that face-to-face communication. And finally, they help to build stronger relationships. Whilst for some people they can be quite an anxiety-inducing experience, it is a real opportunity to be able to reflect over the past year, discuss any problems that have happened, and set goals for the future. And in doing so, it will create more alignment and build those stronger relationships between employees and managers. So nowadays, there is a real need for a performance review model that will suit both remote and office workers, as most of us will be working remotely until 2021 and perhaps beyond. So we need to think as HR leaders, how are we going to have a model which will suit both those who are potentially going to the office and those who are at home?
Great, Maddie. So we can move to the next slide, and see the extra implications for remote work. Now more than ever before, each and everyone experience a new reality. And performance review is among the topics that has been impacted the most due to remote working. We have fragmentation. Employees may not be as productive as in the past due to the adjustment process. And the targets that we used to have may not be any more realistic. And there is a mix of remote and office work complicates even more the process of performance review. So the question here is, how can we better fine-tune this process and make it effective again?
For sure. And I think another key point is we have to bear in mind is that we've all been really impacted unevenly by the pandemic, and everybody has had different experiences. So when we think of these organization-wide processes, it's really important to think, how can we tie that in together for everybody and make sure everyone is having an equal experience and also is having an opportunity to grow despite all of these challenging situations that are happening at the moment.
Exactly. And you mentioned an equal experience. And this is something that all organizations now need to achieve, have an equal performance review, regardless of whether someone is on a remote mode or in the office. So the first, go ahead and propose some best practices. And the first thing for a successful performance review, remote performance review, is to have goal-based assessments. More important than ever before to understand that we need to create trust between the organization and the employee, and also remove any ambiguity from this process. It would be a great idea if we can have a methodology in place like SMART goals or OKR goals, and also link performance reviews with company targets, because this way the employee will feel he contributes to the organizational overall success. In addition, you close any alignment gaps between the employee and the manager, so both parties are aligned on what we see. And performance reviews should be centered around well-defined goals. We need to be clear about what we want to achieve.
For sure. And I think also what's interesting here is, since we are working in the remote environment, it's those office catch-ups and those shorter informal catch-ups aren't happening. So it would be easy potentially, I'm sure the high performers in an organization will still be hitting those targets, but for those who potentially are falling behind, having an objective system in place to ensure whether they're meeting their goals is something that is really important, because otherwise a few people could potentially be left behind, those who maybe are a little shy with remote communication. So having a very clear methodology will help make sure that the performance reviews are equal, and it will stop managers potentially having an element of unconscious bias with their reviews, because it will be very objective.
Exactly, exactly. So next, another good practice and more relevant, given what changes and the change that we are all experiencing, is that we need to have performance reviews in shorter time frames. Employee roles are evolving that way, that we need to adjust tasks and responsibilities to changing work events. So more frequent evaluations that will provide managers the opportunity to give meaningful feedback and at the same time make quick adjustments. Providing frequent feedback increases the chance of employee growing and developing within shorter time frames, because the employee has, better understanding of the things that he needs to improve. Therefore, what we need to do, we need to train managers in order to be able to give frequent feedback. We need to replace annual performance review processes with agile, more continuous feedback systems, and run performance reviews biannually or even better quarterly.
For sure. And just to reiterate, I think we've all very aware how our roles are changing to respond to this pandemic, and what we were doing in January, potentially we have a completely new role now. And it's really important that performance reviews are flexible enough to allow for that growth and development within these roles, which are constantly changing. And we might not know what our goals are going to be for another year, as we don't know how the global situation is going to unfold. So just to reiterate, I think it's really important to have those shorter timeframes quarterly if you can manage it, as it will allow for that opportunity for managers to provide feedback and employees to make changes rather than waiting a whole 12 months before to have that feedback.
So another best practice from our side in terms of how to run the actual performance is the following. We need to have an agenda. So prior to the meeting, have the topics that we are going to cover during the session, and in order to set the structure and facilitate the communication throughout the meeting. In addition, it would be a great idea if we have a performance management system in place, because this way we have everything recorded and written, so we can follow through what we have been doing over the last months. Nevertheless, it is important to have video so we can understand and the body language, and at the same time establish the trust. And it's very important for both parties, for the employee and for the manager, to be listeners during this session and paraphrase in order to make sure they have alignment and they are on the same page. Finally, it is more important than ever before to give some time and discuss things other than business, and release that a performance evaluation is bringing, and at the same time show personal interest around issues that may worry the employee being or a remote working environment.
I think that's really interesting, because just because we have gone virtual, there has been this lack of communication and a feeling of isolation. But just because things are virtual doesn't mean that they have to be impersonal. And there are many ways that you can make these virtual meetings more personal between the employee and managers, as we've mentioned with using video, which I know a lot of us aren't always keen to use whilst working from home. But making sure that both the employee and the manager have their video turned on for performance reviews is essential, because, as Chris has said, there's no way to read body language through a screen, and it's hard to know how your feedback's being given to you or the way that your employee is reacting, because they might be taking their feedback and be see it as very constructive, or it could be something that has really affected them personally, and there is no way that you will be able to tell that without video. And creating a time for small talk. Everyone is living a very different reality at the moment, and taking a few minutes just to find out how your employee is coping in the new situation will allow that conversation to pass a little more fluidly despite the virtual barriers. So just because it's virtual doesn't mean it has to be impersonal. I think that's what we're getting
Exactly.
here.
That's the right way to set it. So, important topic here, something that we should definitely accommodate in the performance evaluations. We were much focused around numerical performance ratings and how they can help categorize in terms of performance. However, now the situation is totally different, since employees are required to exhibit new skills and competencies that are related with remote working. Therefore, we need to measure the behaviors that actually matter nowadays. And these are around remote collaboration, remote communication, ability to self-start, innovation, empathy, and resilience. So we should bring these qualities in the table while discussing employees' performance and not focusing only on quantitative goals and how they performed only in terms of specific numerical outcomes.
For sure, and I think what leaders are realizing now is that there is more to success than just hitting those numerical goals and giving somebody a rating from 1 to 10. Actually, it's much more useful and will be in long term more productive to the business to measure these softer skills, these interpersonal skills that will really allow a company to come together and innovate to not only survive what's going on, but also to thrive.
Perfect, Mari. So finally, we should use performance reviews as a development opportunity. And we need to lead performance reviews with empathy and compassion, understand others, review people-centric, because the most important asset for every organization is its people. Therefore, the most critical process, which is performance reviews, must be people-centric. We need to concentrate on employee growth and learning. Living these conversations should give us something that we should look after instead of being, judgmental and around what we did wrong. We need to focus on reviews, and more specifically, we need to focus on goal setting and future projects, be optimistic about future and how we can further improve. Finally, if we manage to do 1, 2, 3, and 4, we will strengthen our organization culture and further reinforce the values.
Yeah, for sure, Chrissa. And we think here at PeopleGoal that now is not the time to be reprimanding employees for poor performance. You really don't know what could be going on in their personal life. The way we work is being turned upside down. And it's the time, rather than to punish or to reprimand, it's to ask, why is that not going well for you? Why are you not hitting your targets? And there might be a very good reason behind it. So in fact, we need to use performance reviews as a positive thing, as something that's going to grow our organization, to make our employees as strong as they possibly can be. And by doing so, it will only bring good for both employees, company culture, and the organization on a wider level.
Totally agree with you, Maddie. So how to kick off your performance reviews? As an employee, you should start thinking about what you've done over the year, do a self-evaluation about any areas that you may need to improve, or your strength areas, what you've done well. As a manager, you review the goals and see if they are completed, and set up one-on-one sessions, virtual versions, to discuss performance. And of course, as HR, you need to monitor the whole process that is going forward and is moving and it is complete. So communicate changes to the review process early on, so the managers and employees can be prepared and ensure that everything is happening smoothly.
For sure, and this is definitely a time where the whole organization needs to come together to make these remote performance reviews succeed. Everyone from employees to managers to senior leaders and to HR, there's something that everyone can do to make this a really successful process.
So some key takeaways, summarizing every cast today with Maddie. In the one box, we have the traditional performance review model, and in the other, the modern continuous feedback model. So you can see the difference. From annual meetings, we would go to biannual or quarterly check-ins. From evaluating past performance, we should be more future-driven and focus on goal setting and future projects. From paper-based, obviously now we cannot have paper-based evaluations to make them virtual. For performance ratings, we need to start evaluating other skills and behaviors that are matter most currently. So performance ratings are more likely to be scrapped. And from measuring hard skills, as I mentioned, to measure both soft skills in a remote working environment.
This all feeds in, I think, to HR and organizations on a wider scale becoming a lot more people-centric as we begin to realize that people are actually what makes our organizations so successful. And without looking after those people first and focusing on them as individuals, that is the way to achieve real success. And I think we're seeing a slight shift from kind of top-down systems of reviews and ratings to having also a bottom-up version where employees, even from the bottom layers of the organization, also have opportunities to feedback on how things are going, because every single person in your organization should be valued and their opinions do count. So I think that's also another trend we've been seeing, which links into having a more continuous feedback model, is allowing those individual voices to be heard.
Exactly. And to understand the mistakes of the past and find new ways that improve the performance evaluation process is not consider the evaluation process not only as a tool to understand employee results in terms of numerical achievements, but as well as a process, consider it as a process where we can further engage and develop employees.
Absolutely. And whilst the situation this year has been difficult and challenging for many, potentially there's a few benefits coming through in the way in which we treat people in our organizations. And I think despite the challenges of remote working, having a more people-centric focus, as we've spoken out throughout this webcast, is something really positive, and there's definitely a space for improvement on these traditional models. So that is something that we can take away, is that despite the challenges, things are getting better and our processes are improving, and there is still some space for improvement.
Great. I hope our listeners will follow some of the best practices that we shared with them, and we can incrementally see changes in the performance evaluation process.
So that's all from us in terms of content, but if you would like to get some more PeopleGoal insights on remote performance reviews, feel free to download the research slides for your personal use. Check out upcoming and on-demand PeopleGoal webcasts at peoplegoal.com/resources/webcasts. And finally, if you want to connect with us on LinkedIn or Twitter, find us at PeopleGoal. And some further resources for you. You can check out our blog posts, top tips to kick off remote performance reviews in 2020, performance reviews ratings, are they necessary, and 5 examples of employee evaluation forms for remote work. And finally, if you would like to suggest a topic for us to discuss, or even be a guest in one of our upcoming webcasts, feel free to pop me an email at maddie.o'neill@peoplegoal.com. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you, Carissa, for your insights.